She's joining us here in January, kick off the new year. I will do a little introduction on her, and then Megan, if I miss anything, please correct me or add. Otherwise, then we'll get started. So Megan's going to talk about managing the proposal process from kickoff through submission. A little bit about Megan. She is a certified professional services marketer. So that is the certification for SMPS. She leads the marketing and business development efforts at Studio Southwest Architects based in Albuquerque, right, Megan?
Yep.
And then she has 18 years of experience in design and marketing, and the last 13 years been helping in the architecture industry. So Megan's is going to talk to us about managing the proposal process and her best practices that she has learned throughout the years.
A little about myself, you guys. I'm a guru. I am a magician. I work magic. I'm a wizard. All those things that we hear as marketing professionals. But can you guys see my full screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm also, Wayne Campbell is my avatar. He is this visual that I send, I will send regularly to my team whenever we're having a difficult moment, or we just got finished with a particularly difficult proposal. I'll send it to my college-age daughter when she's having a difficult time. If you know the scene, you know that it's right after he's dumped on everybody. He's having a bad day. And he turns around, he's like, sorry about that, like everything's fine. It's all gonna work out. And that's pretty much my MO. But I am a marketer, I'm a designer. I started on the design end. I have a degree in graphic design. I found my way into the AEC industry because I have a friend who became an architect and he knew that I liked doing layout. And so I ended up getting roped into doing proposal management. And so that's my story. I am the marketing director for Studio Southwest Architects. We have been around for almost 40 years. We're multidisciplined. We work in almost every sector there is, so pretty difficult company to market because everything is always, we want to go after everything all the time. But we're architecture and planning, we're collaborative, we've got a great staff of about 35. We do public work, private work, federal work. So any kind of proposal that you might do, I've probably dabbled in responding to any of those formats. And yeah, they're a good group. But I'm also, as Angie mentioned, a CPSM, so Certified Professional Services Marketer. I've been part of the SMPS New Mexico chapter in the Southwest region for years and years. I'm on my 3rd presidential term. I'm actually passing the torch to someone else later this year in September. And love that group. And that's actually how I met Angie, was through the Southwest Regional Conference that just passed. She was one of the speakers in Tucson. So great way to connect through that group. If you don't know it, check it out. I drank the Kool-Aid, so I will stop talking about them. Sorry. But, you know, in preparation, I wasn't quite sure what level everybody would be at. Maybe some beginners, some, you know, career veterans. I figured I would give a broad, very loose overview of, you know, where do you find an RFP? How do you find them, right? RFPs, RFQs, RFIs. You might use an IMS system like a web scraper that returns opportunities based on search criteria, you know, sort of that you pay for. It's paid service. We have it at my office and it's great. You might be a member of one of the million procurement portals that our clients have signed up for. So you might be getting your email pushes from those that notify you when there's a new opportunity, or word of mouth. You might have an engineer who sends you proposals, or a contractor. Design build is really prevalent these days within the architecture community. So we might have different search criteria on our portals or our web scrapers. And so we might not get some of those if they happen to have different keywords. So you can get the RFP notification or RFI, RFQ advertisements from all over the place. Or of course, the best case scenario, you've been tracking it and it's going to come out and you're getting a specific invitation from a client. So those very broad, general, where do they come from kind of a situation here. And then how do you vet them, right? Because we did work for them 20 years ago, we've got to throw our name in the ring. Your president's neighbor, somebody with private development work, if you're working in that commercial sector, that's not uncommon. But how do you really pick what you pursue? And probably everyone has some semblance of a go, no go. We do have that process at my firm. We do have a go, no go sheet, which is a series of questions, right, that you maybe ask your team members, and you allocate points to each of those answers. And then based on the outcome of the points at the bottom, the total, it tells you, like a magic 8-ball, all signs point to no, which you might go after anyway. It's kind of a loose process. We don't use it all the time. Most of the time, at least at my firm, it's pretty obvious if it's a go or a no-go, but we will pull it out for those that have, a little bit more muddy kind of criteria. So it's really great. If you don't have one yet, they're worth having in place so that if you do need to use it, it's kind of the tiebreaker if you have people who are on both sides of the yes and no coin. But what we're primarily talking about today is developing the proposal. You guys can see my full screen of this presentation, right? Because I have so many monitors. I'm just okay.
Yep, we're good, Megan.
Okay, if ever you're like, what is she talking about? Just let me know.
Drinking coffee.
We're drinking lots of coffee, right? Because it's time to get serious, and you have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to do it. And so you better just drop everything, and you've probably got more than one iron in the fire. So this is the part that people think of when they say, oh, hey, like, how do you manage the proposal process? It's not an easy question to answer, because we manage everything that's part of the proposal process, not just where to find it and keeping your eyes peeled, but also determining which ones we should go after. And then we're managing the pre-proposal meeting and your technical staff's schedule at getting to the pre-proposal meeting, and then the debrief from the meeting, and the content generation, and, coordination of internal team, external team, your draft reviews, your checklists, strategizing, what are your differentiators? We're managing all of those conversations and all of those aspects of the job, not just to mention, not to leave out the most important, right? The layout, the design, production and delivery, whether it's virtual or hard copy. And of course, we're always managing just a few last minute ideas, which always come in at the 11th hour. And they're really great, because most of the time they're like solid, great ideas that you were like, where were you 3 days ago when I could do something with this? So the key, at least from my perspective, in managing the proposal process, these components to the proposal process, is communication. You have to communicate clearly, concisely, and consistently. A colleague of mine many years ago said that when she writes emails to her leadership, she writes the whole email and then goes back through and reads it and strips it of anything that is not specifically relevant, so that her communication is as concise as possible. And that was really working for her in communicating with her leaders at that time. If you have children, it does not matter how short of a statement or how concise it is. It's all about the repetition. Put your shoes on, put your shoes on, put your shoes on, right? So I'm not like the mother of the office, although sometimes I'm the mother of the marketing department. But there is a lot of consistency and time management and personnel management. So it's very tricky to answer easily what are the best practices for managing the proposal process, because managing personnel and managing people is very tricky, and it's kind of a gray area because it's different each time. So, everybody likes a heads up. I like the big picture. I like understanding where my technical staff is coming from. I like getting an idea of their vibe or their approach to the project, so that when they fail me later in providing content that I need, or they run into, a construction site thing where they have to like be out of pocket and they're unavailable, I know what it is that they meant to get across. And it really helps with the plan B, which we'll talk about in a minute, because I basically live from the angle of the plan B. But, there's two different types of people, right? If you're giving somebody a ride in the car, you've got the one person who's like, in 3 blocks at the red light, you're going to see this land, big tree, and then you're going to turn left. And then you have the other type of person that says absolutely nothing about direction until you're in the intersection and they're like, oh, turn here. So that's kind of like the two types of people that you work with on proposals, at least from an internal team standpoint through the architecture lens. But communication, verbal and written, is really critical. We use Microsoft Teams. We set up a Teams channel for each of our proposals. We invite all the relevant people, and we use the crap out of it. Stream of consciousness. Oh, I thought of this idea. Here's a link for something else. Through the course of the whole proposal development process, we have a spot to connect with our team members, and it's kind of so that your future self doesn't forget what it was you wanted to get across 3 days before. We also use the cloud sharing. We work directly in a Word file most of the time to answer the actual criteria points, so that the technical staff has a piece of software that they're comfortable using to answer the questions, and they can see what you've put in and the triggers. And Microsoft is awesome where you can tag somebody in your actual emails. So if you've got people who are skimmers when it comes to the written communication over email, they'll at least be tagged by their name, and they won't miss. So I have 7 principals at my firm, and I've got just about as many other project managers. So at any given time, I've got quite a few different types of personality that I'm working with on a proposal. And that's probably the biggest challenge, because some of them really like outlines. Some of them really like working over your shoulder. They all have different working styles. So as you stay at a firm, you do become familiar with certain types of individual and certain types of working style. And it helps you sort of see into that crystal ball a little bit about how the process is going to go. We do use proposal checklists. That's probably and we do use schedules. Schedules a little bit less, because everyone blows them. And once you make the schedule, nobody looks at it. And then it just is a point of contention afterward. What we do to schedule is my marketing coordinator and I have an Outlook calendar that's just the marketing calendar. And we put all of our triggers in there, and our pre-proposal meetings and our strategy meetings and whatever. And it helps us remember, between the two of us working remotely exclusively at this point, it really helps us stay abreast of what's going on with each other's schedules and with each of the proposals that we have going on. And then we can go reach out individually to all of the cats that we're hurting. And but the proposal checklist is awesome. It is not like the checklist that you will see in like a state RFP template where it's like the list of things that you don't want to forget to turn in. It's a little bit more like a summary sheet. It was adapted from a colleague of mine. She shared it with me a couple of years back, and we kind of made it our own, but it has a spot for internal team, external team, important dates, you know, question deadlines, things like that. And then what we do is we put in the actual questions from the evaluation criteria, and then we will at our kickoff meeting be typing in the basic gist of the answer or what our differentiator is on each of those questions directly into that checklist, so that, you know, everybody can look at it later, and we kind of remember where we were coming from in the beginning. But if anybody remembers this commercial from the 80s, the biggest thing is the content. The content, it's a huge sticking point, at least for architects, getting that content in there, writing it. Oh man, it is like the most difficult thing. And one of the questions that came in before this presentation was related to people who go rogue, and how do you manage principals and leaders who are just like off on their own and they disregard every piece of schedule criteria or anything that you've set in place. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. No, it's the age-old question. You gotta find what works for each of your people. And in my experience, what I found are there are two different types of people when it comes to like content specifically, and we can talk about meeting deadlines in a minute. But when it comes to the content, architects, I found there's two different types. One, the type that's just really too busy. They're probably too high up in the chain, in the company, to be like the doer for the content of the proposal, even if they are like the best technical support for answering the criteria. So they might be traveling to a job site, or you know, just really slammed with billable projects. And it's very frustrating from a marketing standpoint when we know the value of the proposal in the acquisition process, to not have those leaders of the firm be prioritizing the proposal itself on their to-do list. But that is just the way that it goes. And then you've got the other half of people that I found who are just insecure in their writing, because maybe they're architects or engineers and they're okay, but they're not that great at it, and they feel out of practice, and it makes them nervous. So I learned a really great trick from the keynote speaker at the Southwest Regional Conference. I was sitting next to her before a morning that I had to go do some mic time because I was one of the co-chairs, and I was a little bit nervous about it. And she starts chit-chatting with me, and she's asking me about my kids, and she's asking me about, like, you know, soft questions about like personal whatever, and blah, 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 right? And then they're like, oh, it's time for Megan to come up to microphone. I go up there, I just do my thing, and I come back and sit down. And I was like, oh my God, you primed me. You just primed me to speak in front of everybody. Because if someone is asking you questions about something you know, and you're passionate about, and you like, you are already turned on and you're warmed up and the words are flowing. So when I have difficulty getting my content, I realize I do something similar, where I start asking my technical folks questions about other things. I might know that there's a slight correlation between the criteria I need them to respond to and the subject matter I bring up. But if you can start talking to them about, oh, that other project they finished last year, and oh, I noticed it had a really cool element of blah, blah, blah. And then, oh man, they're talking about it, and they're like, oh, it was this process and that process. Then you can sort of like change the course of the conversation and be like, oh, that's like in our proposal that we're writing for right now. Oh my God, why don't you tell me about blah, blah, blah? And then all of a sudden they're like, yes, and I know this, and I can give you the information I need. How do you capture it? Because I'm not going to sit down and write it. Sometimes I will just have people dictate it to me over the phone. If they're driving to a project site, I'll be like, call me New Mexico is very vast and our cities are very spread out. There's probably a 3-hour block where they will tell me everything I want to know. Or I will ask for bulleted lists. I've asked for voice to text, have them just ramble it into some sort of, dictating software and then give it to me, or even just stream of consciousness, whether it's over an email or in our Teams channel or a Word file. We can just take that general sense of what they're trying to get across, and we can make it into nice marketing paragraphs and put it into the proposal. And then plan B, you guys, is do it yourself. Okay. I don't advocate for it, but we realize that's the reality. And honestly, from the beginning of your kickoff meeting, you will see if you're going to need to use plan B, and you will be able to tell how much of plan B you will need to use, because people give you those indicators right away. Can you go to the pre-proposal? Yeah, I can probably squeeze it in. Already a red flag. The tone of voice, how they're prioritizing the requests. I mean, I could write something. I'm not a great writer, but I could probably write something for technical scope. And you're like, oh God, here we go. So I do think that when you work with certain teams, you can see who feels more comfortable, who are the people that are too busy, who are the people that just need a little bit of confidence boost in being able to talk about the specialized information. And you can know from the very beginning, before the pre-proposal, how much of plan B you're going to have to do. Because architects, I don't know about engineers or contractors, but it is way easier for them to just redline what they think is not quite right than it is for them to start the conversation. So if you need to go in there and just dump a bunch of stuff and be like, I don't know, can you like help me? That goes a really long way, unfortunately. But plan B, always look at it from the plan B. But how do you manage these people, right? Leaders, principals, there are bosses. There's the whole help me help you kind of struggle that we do as marketers, because all we want to do is make it really good and have it sound really legit and meet the deadlines and have the criteria, but we can't go around threatening them. I do feel like the Godfather sometimes, where I'm like, and another thing, but tools to actually do this, if we're talking practically, clear expectations from the beginning, straightforward communication where you're offering solutions. Oh, it sounds like you're going to be really busy. We have to get this done by this time. You have to help me write this content by this time, or we will not be able to submit it and it's not worth the time. If you're too busy, how about we bring this guy in to write it for you? How about we, is there someone who can support you on the team that maybe we can bring into these meetings, and then they can kind of help articulate your strategy to me, because it sounds like you're going to be too busy to help write the content. That happens quite a bit in my firm, because you can just see, oh, that guy's bitten off more than he can chew. And the other thing is probably comes with longevity in your career. I am a very straightforward communicator, but I know my audience very well, and they know my personality type. So I don't go in, with my guns drawn. And I don't advise my proposal coordinator, who's, on the later edge of entry level. I don't advise her to go in with her guns drawn either. But depending on who I'm talking to and the context, they know me, and they know that I'm just trying to get them to, a positive outcome. And I can be very straightforward, and you have to stick to your guns. People bring you that last minute idea. I had a gentleman who was always bringing me amazing content, written hard copy in a smudgy red pencil. And he would bring it the day before it was due. And I'd be like, this is incredible content, but like, I cannot include it. I will find a way to take the essence of what you're saying and maybe add a sentence, but we are so far beyond a whole new page that I can't help you. And you have to be able to speak to your team members in that way as a marketing proposal person. And then, part of that might be like a respect level. I don't know about all of you, but I'm aware of the fact, at least in our industry here in New Mexico, that marketing people started out as like communications people who worked the front desk. And there's a strange perception of that type of a role versus someone who's leading a marketing department and has all of these like, you know, great ideas and strategy and are driving you somewhere, right? So you might run into an issue where you feel like people are not actually respecting the role that you have. And for that, I would say join a board. Go through and invest in your professional development, because once they start hearing other people in the industry being like, oh, I saw your marketing person at this thing, they're awesome. Or, oh, you're like on that board, they start taking notice of the fact that you're more than just like this admin support that they may, without even realizing, be sort of categorizing you as, because that's the way it used to be back in the beginning of their tenure in, you know, whatever their very long career. And the other thing would be take leadership training, go to seminars or webinars on leadership approach, sort of look into that, because a lot of that is not just leading your, you know, team that is supporting you, but it really helps with some perspective of how to manage your higher ups. And then a couple tools of the trade. This is a cherry picker. There's one in my garage. My husband is rebuilding a Trans Am. And so I think about it a lot as a main tool. We use InDesign in my office. And how do you get, once you get your content, how do they do the drafts? How do you get them to read the draft and provide the content, the comments? Are they reading it? We don't know. Will they give us some comments? Probably a few. Hopefully it's not too late to incorporate them. But Adobe Acrobat's awesome. We use it pretty much regularly. And I know that there are a lot of other really fancy tools. I know InDesign and Acrobat are blended together. You can do some really cool cloud sharing with timestamps. So those links to those cloud documents only last a certain amount of time, which helps get people to feel the urgency of like accessing that and giving their comments before the link is no longer active. And those sorts of things, real fancy and awesome, but don't use everything that's fancy and flashy if it's not going to work for you. You got to cherry pick these tools and find out what works. Our company, we don't need a lot of those fancy things. They just need a lot more consistent communication, and then they'll actually follow through. And Bluebeam, I don't know if you guys are using Bluebeam in your offices. My architects have, once we converted to using Bluebeam and that's their default PDF reader, they mark up PDFs 5 times more frequently than they used to. And I think it's because the tools themselves are more, the logic is more related to like Revit or something. So their tools are very familiar to them, and they feel so comfortable marking up your PDF with these tools that they're used to using every day on their Revit, on their drawings or whatever. So I think sometimes you got to just kind of like find what works. But you know, what happens after the proposal? What happens after you turn it in? You relax and you prepare for the interview, which is a whole nother presentation. But really, managing the proposal process doesn't end with the turn in. We have after action reviews in my office. We do debriefs with the clients if we don't win. And really we should if we do win. Those are a little bit less formal. And then there's database updating. We don't use a fancy CRM tool. Everything we do is manual. And that's okay. It's working for us at this point. And having that kind of tool in your toolbox makes the proposal process that much easier, because you got shortcuts. You know where your most recent write-ups are, you know where your most recent images are. You know, if you're constantly sort of updating resumes and things like that on a quarterly basis or something, when you set a schedule for stuff like that, it really helps you be comfortable. Oh, my past self was awesome, and last quarter they updated all those things, and now I know I can trust that that information is correct, and you don't have that extra double checking that wastes some extra time. After action reviews, if you're not familiar with those, they're great. They are the internal team debrief after a proposal is done. I do these with my marketing coordinator. She's there on the far right of that group shot right there. Her name is Kaylin, and she's amazing. We have these kind of informally when it's been a very pleasant process, and then more formally when there's been problems, whether the team was really large or there were communication crosses. And those ones will have a specific meeting, and we'll take notes and try and find solutions for the things that were creating bottlenecks. So again, lots of communication, lots of talking, lots of hashing it out. But I think those are, you know, it's just really important to have like an after the proposal gets turned in sort of a process to it. And also, like, I have one other tool that I use is it's manual, again, just in Excel, but it's a list of all of the proposals that we turn in every year. And I track which ones we're on someone else's team. I track whether it's a win or a loss. I track whether it's a win or a loss with or without an interview. I track all of those things. And yeah, I probably end up putting some of those into a JIRA, like some of the criteria and stuff, like who gets the award and things like that. But that physical document helps me keep track so that in 6 months, hey, did you hear about that one proposal? How come we didn't go after it? I bet we missed the blah, blah, blah. You can be like, no, we saw it. We talked about it. We no-goed it for this reason. And it gives you that safety net, because I don't know about you, but like, if it's not on the list, I forget about it entirely. There are some things that it's like, there's just too much coming in that you have to track it and then forget about it. So that is my presentation. These are the people that I've referenced in my in my meeting here. My oldest daughter, Julia, my husband, Tim, and that's Eva on the left and little Natalie right in the middle. So full house, lots of fun, lots of sass.
Yeah.
And that is my presentation on proposal process.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Does anybody want to come off mute and ask your question? Otherwise, I can do it. I know. Who was it? No? No one wants to be brave? Let me unpin you, Megan. Maybe.
Yes, see, I'm looking in the chat. Words flow, fancy tool. I don't know this, but it sounds amazing. I do hope that sometime we'll be able to institute new exciting things, because I'm all for changing. You know, it's not about staying stagnant, but right. Man, depending on the person on your team, it's like some people are just so, I'm like, just give them the pencil, just give them the pencil. If it means they'll give me what I need.
Okay. One of the questions, Megan, was, I think it was, I don't remember. I want to say Doug and someone else, but the makeup and structure of your proposal team. How do you determine assignments? How do you track them? What does that look like? What do you do there?
Part of our proposal checklist that I mentioned does have a column for who's responsible for what, kind of like an outline. And so our team is generally built up of, we'll have a principal in charge, we'll have a project manager, we'll have a project architect if the PM is not certified, and then we might include an additional piece of support, like a BIM coordinator. We're doing a lot on 365, BIM 360. And, you know, you might need someone who's specifically managing the drawings. And then, you know, we have our consultant team, our external consultant team, but typically the only people externally that will require input on a project, mostly it's MEP, sometimes landscape. If we're talking about, you know, some major site stuff, we might bring in the civil. So I might actually give some assignments to some of those individuals to help bolster their standpoint from their discipline, and they're pretty much never the problem. It's internal staff members who just have too many things going on. But it's just, I mean, constantly bugging them. If you have someone who is sometimes a little bit on the slower end to respond with some of the content, sometimes we do like 30-minute touch points a couple times a week. And what this does is either it gives them 30 minutes where you can extract the information from them in real time, or it gives them kind of like bookends for their time management, where they're like, oh, I need to get that done before our huddle up on Thursday or something. And then you're actually seeing a little bit more action in between meetings, and not every meeting is just a working meeting. But, you know, it's like a little bit feels like overkill to have so many like small meetings, but I do think that those touch points, sometimes depending on the circumstances with your team, they really do help.
Perfect, Megan. Before the rest of you drop off, thank you for attending. Next month, we are re-coordinating. Thank you, Anne. We're moving next month's talk, which you didn't even know about yet, to, I think, April. So we're still figuring out February's talk or webinar. It'll be middle of February. But once you close the Zoom, you'll get a link to a survey that gives Megan and I feedback, and we would appreciate that. Otherwise, Megan, do you have time for a few more questions?
Sure.
Perfect.
I know I had technical stuff in the beginning, so I don't want to chip anybody the couple minutes, but.
All right, we'll go to Doug. What kind of software do you use in your process? You said you didn't have a CRM, but what about other analytics, reporting? You talked about Excel. Are there any other tools from even a marketing perspective or proposal that you use, Megan?
We do use the IMS system for tracking, and we do use a Jira, probably only at a fraction of its actual capacity, but it's useful. You know, you can upload your documents and stuff in there so that your team doesn't have to, you know, go to the server and get in with their VPN every time. Teams is probably the thing that we use most. I know in the beginning of 2020, when everybody was converting over, we were already planning on converting to Teams, but everybody was talking all this trash, and I'm like, I use it all the time and I love it. I can tell when people are online. Like, I mean, it's just very useful for coordinating. But we do use Mural as a strategizing tool. If we need to do, like, for some of those people that we have in our office who are a little more visual, it's difficult for them to you know, picture everything that you're talking about when you've got 100 things to cover. So InDesign, you know, primarily, and then I feel like there's a third thing that I'm forgetting, but primarily those things. We don't, I wish we had a CRM tool, but at this point, doing the manual tracking works for us.
And that's what matters, is finding the right tool that works, that people use. Yes, thank you. Brittany, yes, Teams is compatible with outside partners. Most of them don't use it, like you're saying, they use Google Drives. There is some coordination. You don't have all of that functionality depending on the company and how they have it set up between calling within Teams and Access. But otherwise, I mean, as a consultant, I coordinate with all of my corporate clients on Teams. It's just getting access and doing that coordination. So yeah. Kelly, how much do you say the experts have in design and overall look in proposals?
Depends. I have a couple principals who are very much concerned with the style, the stylistic, you know, presentation of the material, and some others who probably don't really even do much with the draft, but read through it and comment on pictures that they feel might not be adequate or should be included. You know, I think it depends. The architectural side is pretty artistic, so you know, they're definitely pretty hands-on when it comes to how it's presented. So we do spend a lot of time talking about design and presenting our brand and all that sort of thing in our office. And the experts, you know, I'll invite whoever says that they want to be invited. And then, you know, if they have a schedule conflict, they can't come, but that's okay. But at least, you know, I'm leaving it open for people to give their feedback. They're very artistic people.
Yes. Yeah, I think you get that a lot more on the architecture side for sure, potentially. I don't see that as much on the engineering and construction side. One of the other questions, how do you adapt your strategy, proposal strategy coordination for handling multiple pursuits at a time, large or small or all varying sizes?
Oh man, it's wild. When we have a lot of irons in the fire like that, my proposal coordinator and I, we have a lot more touch point meetings without the technical staff. I mean, we have some with them, but we look for ways to shortcut, and it's almost like I do a lot of the technical writing. I assist with a lot of the technical writing at this point, because if you're reading those narrative questions and you're listening, you are able to fill in some of the holes on your own after a certain point. So I do some of the technical writing. So I will help the proposal coordinator and say, I'll just write that. I'll do the first draft. I'll do those things so that she can work on design and layout. But essentially the way we break up between the two of us, the proposal documents, is she'll create shells pretty early on in the process. We know it's going to be 20 pages. We know it's going to have these forms. She'll do all of that stuff really up front and create a shell, even if there's no pictures. It's just like a gray placeholder picture box. And then she's got kind of like a basic layout structured. And then one of the things that we do to save time is we have a lot of project page files in InDesign that are created per market sector. Like I said, we go after everything from a museum to a courthouse to a commercial development to whatever. I mean, we're all over the place. So we have InDesign files with a single project page for each of our most marketable projects, and they're all laid out the same. So when we need to like populate our proposals, we'll open up that market sector list and copy and paste straight from InDesign into our proposal document so that we have those page layouts pretty much already fleshed out. And then we'll do a placeholder if we know that there's another one coming, or we don't know what we want to include or whatever. So finding shortcuts within the materials that you have, your boilerplate narratives. I know we all have boilerplate narratives. It's okay. There's a starting point. We have like a Word file directory in our marketing department, so that if we do need to place hold, I mean, we use lorem ipsum and people are like, what is this text in here? And I'm like, it's literally not for you to read. That's why you can't read it. Please don't focus on that. So if you do have boilerplate that you can start with, you might throw those into the she might throw those into the shell, and then put a little like, we wanted to get specific about this here. So if you do need to bypass that working Word file that everybody uses when there's a lot of time, and just start literally editing and adding text into these InDesign drafts to save time, that's pretty much the shortcut when we have a lot of proposals going on. And then we'll swap. She'll say, I'm done with the layout of this one. I think everything's in. I'm going to get out of this one and go into this other one. And then I'll open up, do some, you know, last minute design detail stuff, and then make my final redline comments or whatever directly in that InDesign draft. So it's kind of like working and designing at the same time, but I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, the other thing, Annie, that I do and use is creating one to-do list that has all the pursuits on it, or everything that I'm doing. And then I assign, here's all the tips, or here's all the tasks, and here's who's doing it, or here's who needs to, a task that needs to be assigned. So then I can keep track of everything on one list versus having to go to multiple. And that just makes me more crazier. So trying to aggregate it for my brain works best. Putting it on one list and then going from there. I also have all of the pursuits on one calendar with all the major deadlines. So then it's all in one place there as well. versus going back to a responsibility matrix or a separate schedule or multiple team sites. That's the other thing I do is set that up.
We used Trello for a while, my marketing coordinator and I, to sort of do that. And at the time we were using Slack in the office for communication. This was prior to our Teams migration. And that worked well for us at the time. And now, you know, with everything being so Microsoft, we do have a OneNote where we kind of do this. We check in, we have our marketing meeting once a week, and it will be like, what are your administrative tasks that people have asked you to do? What help on billable work are you supposed to be doing? And then when it comes to proposals, like where are you at? Where can I help support? There's a lot of check-in like that. But, you know, Microsoft has all of the extra widgets you can add. So we don't use Trello as much anymore, but that is useful and it's a good tool.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find that right tool on managing tasks that, because Teams also has the to-do list in there. And like, does that work? Because then you can assign it to people and then they get emails. And so there's so much if you're within the Microsoft family that Teams can do for you. With their planner, with their scheduling tools, that you could build your responsibility matrix in Microsoft Planner even and assign it to people. So yeah, it's all the fun stuff like that and figuring out what works.
I know Google has a lot. I'm not as familiar. My husband's company primarily uses Google for all the same things that we use Teams for. So I do know that if you're in the Google world with the Google Drive sort of format, it's very useful also. I'm sure they have, you know, widgets you can integrate for list tracking and stuff in there also. I just am not quite as familiar with those ones.
For those who are still on, I didn't mention this earlier, I will be sending out the YouTube recording as well here later, or probably on Monday, once I get that off to my team to get off to you. So for those who have to leave or did leave early, we're still recording, so we'll catch some of these last questions. But I was going to ask, does anyone want to come off mute and ask Megan one last question? Otherwise, I have one last one. I think that was from Kelly that I was going to ask. Anybody brave enough today? No, not on Friday. Okay.
Hey guys, I do have a question. If you can hear me.
Oh, we have multiple people now. Who was that? I can't. Let me.
I'll defer. This is Tony. I'll hold back if somebody else would like to go.
Oh, sorry. This is Amanda. I am a sole marketer right now for an engineering firm, and I'm just curious because like I do all the teaming requests as we sub for a lot of like civils and some architects and GCs, but as I do all the teaming and the primes, it's harder for me to kind of get the information because I'll work on multiple projects with the same project manager. So a lot of the stuff is repeating. Is there any way where I can make it, or that you think that would be best to make it more specific towards each request? Does that make sense?
I think so. So are you talking about like answering similar questions in different sections in the book and how to kind of make it not sound so redundant? Because yeah, I hear you. You know, man, that's hard. I think, and there's probably a bunch of different kinds of workshop and stuff that have come out on like how to best position, and really it's like a theme. So if you can come up with a theme for what it is that you're selling as like your differentiator, like you might have a really great familiarity with that client. You might use that theme to sort of rework some of your sort of redundant type questions through that lens, and it might make it sound a little bit different. Or, you know, if it's really technical stuff, it's tricky because you kind of can't make it very different if they're asking something really technical and you're trying to provide like a equally technical response. But, you know, I think sometimes I will just ramble on to myself because I have sometimes I get writer's block and I'm like, I know how to answer this question, but I'm having a hard time getting past like one sentence because I'm just like all caught up on the word choice or whatever. And so what I'll do is just kind of as though I'm talking to someone really candidly, I'll try and explain it without using really nice words and then come up with a different way to say the same thing. And then it's almost like some sort of improv exercise or something. But I do find that that helps a little to maybe think out loud in that way. But yeah, there's a lot of redundancy in some of these criteria points and they do score separately. So making sure it's not horrible, but like verbatim is tricky. So
Yeah.
But no, I feel you. That's a hard one.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your insight.
Thanks.
The other thing, Amanda, that you could do is incorporate proofs into that. And that would help not always make it the same. And whether it's a call out, whether it's incorporated within your text, that's the other option I would recommend. And then Tony, did you want to ask yours?
Sure, great. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the time today, and I also appreciate the many tips I've picked up as well along the way.
Good.
I have a two-part question, if I may. I was wondering what the agenda may look like for an initial RFP type kickoff meeting. And I guess secondary to that is what type of summary, if any, would seem appropriate to send out in front of that meeting to the team?
Are we talking like pre-proposal meeting kickoff, or are we talking post pre-proposal? Let's figure out if we really want to like do this.
I would say pre-proposal. We already know we're going to be bidding on something, and now we're trying to get that engagement to avoid Plan B as much as possible.
Right. I would, and I'm sure Angie, you probably, since you've got like that writing background for sure, I'm sure you have some insight to offer, but you know, the agenda could have, you know, just a couple main points that you want to get across. One, I would say, and I don't know how to articulate this in the agenda, but a general discussion about the project is really helpful. So you can get that gist, you can figure out where your technical staff is coming from. You know, I always ask things like, is there going to be some sort of concern with this? Or, you know, parking's always an issue. Do you see an issue with, you know, parking on this site? Or, you know, you might pick up on some things that you know are always hot button items for your particular industry. And on your agenda, you might just put down, you know, schedule and responsibility check. So you can find out where your technical staff is, whether they're going to be busy in 3 days at a project site, and they didn't tell you because they're not going to offer up any information because it doesn't seem relevant at the time, but all of a sudden you don't have people available. And then you might put in, you know, general project description, get those tidbits, try and figure out, you know, the general sense of the project. And then really the last thing I always end with in those initial kickoff meetings is like the draft schedule. And it's loose, and we'll look at a calendar together and it'll be like, our first draft is probably going to come out on this day, even if it's full of big fat holes, so that they can see where we need to focus, and so that I can see where I might need to do Plan B if they start getting too busy. And those would be maybe the main 3 things on an agenda for like a, you know, it's like a debrief of the pre-proposal meeting kind of, sometimes could be added in as a 4th thing, but I hope that's helpful. Angie, I'm sure you have something.
Yeah, depending on your team, Tony, it can be formal or informal, and whether that's an hour to a half a day and what that looks like, because you could tag in outlining meetings to whether you put in a IFBP or SWOT or other messaging components into there, depending on what that looks like. So developing that win strategy sometimes gets rolled into the kickoff meeting. We always talk about competition usually. how
See, I knew you'd know what to say. I'm like, yep, that's right. Yep, yep.
let's
And
see.
talking about competition is really important. People think
Yep.
that's a waste of the hour, and it is really not. You have to think about who else is going in against you and how you can
Yep.
position.
Exactly. The other big thing there is just making sure everyone understands the deliverables and we caught everything. So we will review the responsibility matrix, what that looks like, who has assignments, who do we need to change because people are on vacation, and whatever that looks like. So those are the main buckets, Tony, for the that I usually do for the kickoff meeting, and depending on complexity, that all changes. Or not all changes, but adding more pieces in depending on the group.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the comments.
Yeah. Okay, we are officially 1 o'clock. Megan, thank you very much. For those that are on, thank you for hanging out with Megan and I this afternoon. Glad we got through Megan's Wi-Fi difficulties. That was good. Otherwise, it would have been a very short talk today. So we'll get the recording next week. Thank you, Kelly. That will come out via email. I will also post it in the LinkedIn group as well. Any parting thoughts, Megan, before we let everybody go this Friday afternoon?
Just thank you all. It's great. I like discussion, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Angie, for the invitation.
Of course, thank you. Yes, and I also captured all the questions, so if there's any more, shoot me an email and we'll get those responded between Megan or I. And otherwise, enjoy your Friday. Hopefully you can get out soon and don't have any more meetings this afternoon. So, all right, thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, bye.